Hello, Steve White, Steve Arts 89. I'm back with my log and I'm going to review Season 2 of Twin Peaks. Now, as I said before, if you watched my video, I saw Twin Peaks as one whole series, basically. In Australia, we got the first 4 episodes, the pilot and the first 2 episodes, essentially the first 4 episodes, shown as a miniseries. And then, from then on, we got a straight run of, I think, 26 episodes, so 6 months of Twin Peaks, uninterrupted. This was a year after the series had premiered in America, and we didn't know who had killed Laurie X. It hadn't shown in America yet, and even though it did show in America before it showed here by quite a bit, it was never ruined. Nobody leaked it, nobody talked about it. I never heard who the murderer was, and I think people pretty much respected that and respected the audience and let them see it unfold as it was meant to unfold on the show. Now, a lot of people trashed the second season, which I didn't realise it was a thing, because like I said, I viewed it as one season. I found the pilot episode with the extra dream sort of scene, which is what it essentially is. And unfortunately, my mum failed to tape the first episode for me. So I had a gap of 1 episode, and the next episode, the third episode, was recorded by a neighbour of mine. I was in hospital at the time, and I had to get people to tape the first couple of episodes. And that was taped with barely bad reception. So starting off to watch the series, the pilot, the miniseries was great, and then there was a missing episode, and one was hard to watch, and then the rest of it. So when I reviewed it, I was really happy to find, reviewed when I watched it again, which I did again and again, because it was the kind of thing you could put on. I had basically 8 episodes, a video, and you could just watch the whole thing over a weekend, basically. I'd watch it again and again and again. I was obsessed with it. I loved it. And then I found that they had released it on video, but it was released as 2 cassette cases with 8 or 10 episodes each. So it was Series 1, Series 2, Series 3, and Series 4, which, of course, it was only 2 seasons of one series, so it didn't make any sense. They released it like that. They acted like each release was a separate series or season, but either way, I got to watch it over and over again. And then eventually I actually found the whole thing released on video in Kmart one day, and I bought it, and that way I had the whole thing consistent quality, and again I watched it again and again and again. But the series itself, it starts off well. They pick up where they left off. The momentum, the tone, everything continues beautifully, and we're all drawn back in by the same things that drew us in the first time: the mystery of who killed Laura, the connection of everyone to it, the obsession from people about it, the whole town sort of being aware of it or fixated on it. And those are elements that I think are really relatable, because if you live in a small town, everyone knows everybody, everyone talks about the same things. And I felt that really was just an element, along with just the feel and tone of the town, that was really great. And the characters, they're all well acted, they're all interesting. Now, the things that went wrong here, there are a couple of things that went wrong. The main thing was the studio, the executives, particularly Bob Iger, and once I heard his name, I'm like, oh, really? He's got a history now. He actually was part of selling Twin Peaks as a series because he thought it could do something for the network, because it was so different and unique. But he was also the same person who pulled back and said, we need to just give people an answer. People need to know who killed Laura Palmer. And that was essentially just letting the air out of the balloon, because even if you had everyone else's stories going and you followed on with the town, the central mystery, what connected them all, was gone, and you couldn't really remove that unless you had something to stand in its place or some extension of that. And they didn't really set that up well enough. And this mystery of who killed Laura Palmer was a lot stronger than the Wyndham Earl, because there he was. We knew who he was, and he was a bit of a cartoon character. He was a bit of a Batman villain. So that element of mystery was gone, but it was being replaced by the lodges and that element of it. But that element was a bit out there for some people. Not me, I was fine with it, but other people, they really felt like the story was over. We found out who... They didn't get it on any further levels. They weren't interested in any further levels. They sensed it and experienced it and felt it on some different levels, but they didn't really engage with it, I think, for the most part. And those people sort of tuned out once the basic mystery was resolved. And of course we find out, I think, I have trouble working out what episodes are which, because it depends. Do you count the pilot as episode 1 or the first episode as episode 1? I saw the fourth episode is episode 1. So, fifth episode is episode 1. So we end up around episode 14, 15, 16 where we find out who the killer is. And then it's a couple of episodes until everyone else finds out who the killer was. And so the first mistake was forcing the revelation of Laura's killer on the series. The second mistake was how they picked up after that. And how they picked up after that was they didn't. They just jumped 3 days later. We didn't see the town react to Leland and the killer being revealed and all that, and Sarah and how everyone reacted, and Donna and James, how they reacted to Maddie's death. We didn't really see Maddie's death. Like, there should have been a real reaction in the town. There's the serial killer. It's a real serial killer. There's another person that's been killed. Someone we know. They could have really pulled that out and got another 3 or 4 episodes out of Maddie's murder and trying to work out who it was. Instead, there was just this rush to just answer the questions, to just solve it and end it. And I don't know what they thought they were going to do after that, what the studios thought they were going to do after that, what the network thought they were going to do after that. Now, the writers, they had this other story that they set up, and they had all the little stories, but then we had the third issue that sort of ruined Twin Peaks, because it did end up, it wasn't ruined, but it did have issues in the second season. The other story that was sort of supposed to carry on the audience's interest, which was a very real-world story, was Agent Cooper and Audrey, because she was still chasing him, and there was that will they, won't they, will he because it's wrong, because he's so young, blah, blah. And that would have been a really interesting element, and something people really wanted to see and could have been invested in. But unfortunately, Laura Flynn Boyle, who was dating Kyle MacLachlan, did not want Sherilyn Fenn anywhere near Kyle MacLachlan, because obviously she has a mirror and she can see Sherilyn Fenn. So she was obviously very insecure, and she imposed. And also Kyle MacLachlan felt it would be a compromise for the character to hook up with Audrey because she was so young. I'm like, but that was the point, that he couldn't have her, that he shouldn't. And will he, will they, won't they? Is it okay? After we've been with these characters for a couple of years, they've aged 3 weeks, but they've aged like 2 years for us. Will the audience accept it and want it? So they could have gone with that. That would have been far more interesting. That got thrown out. What was the other element? So a couple of things were just thrown out, and I'm like, why would they do that? Like I said, they didn't fully explore the murder of Maddie and the resolution of that story, the effect it had on the town, the effect the revelation would have had on the town. We just have this one scene where they're having like the wake 3 days later, bit of conversation, and then we're automatically put into these other characters. And some of them are new characters that we never really saw, stories that are just being started up, and stories that were supposed to like continue on, like I said, got cut off, and things had to be pushed out, things had to be ended off, and it wasn't as designed. Now, the idea that this was all because Lynch wasn't in charge and control is a little bit of a misconception, because Lynch didn't write and direct every episode. There's this myth that he wrote and directed the whole first season, and the second season was taken over by other people and they ruined it. That wasn't the case. He was already focusing on other things, and he went off to do Wild at Heart. He did come back, and they did sort of pull back and pull into some elements of the show. And the last couple of episodes, I know at least the last episode, it's understood that Lynch just sort of sat the script down, and they just sort of improvised a lot of the things. Mostly, I'm guessing what was just in the Red Room. The rest of it, I'm sure, he stuck to the script and what was filmed and everything. But they never expected to get a season. They never expected to get a second season. They set up a bunch of cliffhangers to hopefully get a second season, but they were never interested in solving the case of Laura Palmer, explaining the case. It was just about a way to get into this town and explore this town and all those things that were in the town. And they got a season, they loved it. They didn't think they'd get a second. They got a second season, they were happy to explore it. But then, they had these things imposed on them and these other things that were compromised. And what we ended up with was a disengagement on some level. And also the other element, I think they moved the series again. The first time it was on, the miniseries was like on Sunday. Then the weekly episode was Thursday, had the water cooler effect everyone talked about on Friday. They moved it to Wednesday. That helped it because it wasn't competing with Cheers. But then they had the Gulf War break out, and the Gulf War was preempting the show. So people would tune in for Twin Peaks and it wouldn't be on. There'd be, coverage of the Gulf War for like an hour or so. So it was hard for people to keep their interest and keep coming back because just so many elements worked against Twin Peaks. Now, had the network not imposed, had they been able to continue the threads that they had planned, and had they, scheduled the show so it wasn't running up against the news and the Gulf War, I think it would have had a really well-received second season, and they probably would have got a third season, which would have been interesting to explore how, Agent Cooper, Bob could have used Agent Cooper to, stop himself from being revealed, because had they not actually revealed who the killer was, that would have been a way for him to hide. It also would have been just an interesting thing of being both, the villain and, the good guy. So that's something they could have really explored that they didn't get to. And then, of course, the ratings, they got down to about 10 million. Now, the lowest point of season 1 was 12 million. So they still had a sizable audience despite being moved, despite the main sort of mystery gone and all these other elements coming in. And people sort of got lost, but then they came back to it. And I think they would have stuck with it. I think it could have had a third season. But obviously, if they'd had a stronger second season that didn't have these sort of sidetracks and issues, the ratings would have been better. And that was all the network cared about. It was an expensive show. They had a lot of actors, high production value. And when it started to dip, they were just like, okay, we're out. So they didn't really have any faith in it. They never did. They didn't know what to do with it. Bob Iger didn't know what to do with it. I have so little respect for Bob Iger after some of the things I've heard, including this. So I've never had a face to put it on of who killed Twin Peaks, who ended it, who cancelled it, and now I do. But yes, so of course after this we had Fire Walk With Me, which I reviewed first because this is the beginning of the sort of betrayal of the fans in a way, because a lot of people wanted the cliffhangers resolved. They wanted to know what happened. They wanted to understand who Bob was. They wanted all this explained. And when we heard there was no third season, because of course at first people thought we're getting a third season. I thought we're getting a third season. No one really knew it was the end, but it was. And then we found out they were doing a movie, and everyone got excited because they're doing a movie to give us all the answers, to end it off properly. But no, then news came out it's a prequel. But then we're like, but we also filmed some scenes after the series, so we are going to get those answers and that, and everyone got all excited. And then then most of that was edited out, and then we found out from the deleted scenes later that it really was just a couple of random scenes, and really nothing really was concluded, except we found out that Annie lived, and Cooper presumably fooled people into thinking he was Cooper, and he was just in shock from what happened, and the assumption was he would go on and use Bob to Bob would use Cooper, I've said that twice the wrong way, would use Cooper to get away with things like he did with Leland, where he was behind everything, but Leland was sort of still a person. So how he would negotiate that and use Cooper would have been very interesting and disturbing. The whole idea that he would perhaps finally have this relationship with Audrey because he was now Bob, or would he now assault Audrey? Would she get pregnant? Some of these things that were all thought of. There were a lot of ways they were going to go with this. There was a third season planned. It just didn't happen. So they got sidetracked in season 2, but they had season 3. They got back on track. They were derailed by the network, really, and then they had to put themselves back on track. They didn't do it to themselves. But I wish there had been a third season of Twin Peaks, because we never got a third season of Twin Peaks. We got The Return. We got Fire Walk With Me, and we got The Return, a prequel movie, and a revival event series / movie in 18 pieces, but we never really got Twin Peaks season 3. So I love season 1. I love season 2. Season 1 is just this perfect series of episodes. It is great. There are issues with season 2, but I still love the characters. I still love the town. They still had the spirit and the tone to an extent, and they certainly found it again towards the end. They just got lost in the middle, and I can forgive them for that. But I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of season 2, season 1. And did you feel betrayed by Fire Walk With Me? Because, like I said, I'd heard it was going to be, a sequel series, and a movie was going to answer all the questions from the series. Then we found out it was, prequel, but then it was supposed to be scenes filmed, and then then they were deleted, and then there was that for that longest period of time people thought they were all just being kept from us and that had been filmed, but they just decided to just stick with the prequel nature. And then we found out later that they really weren't filmed except for like the scene with Annie and Dale, and that's it. So there's also this life that Twin Peaks had, in that the belief there was some of it withheld and still a hope for more. So Twin Peaks had a very interesting life, and the way it kept going and people's interest kept in it, and we eventually did get the return, it was fascinating. I think Firewalker was sold on the idea of it sort of answering the questions that people weren't done with Twin Peaks, as opposed to just as a Lynch film of its own. So, yep. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of Twin Peaks Season 1, Season 2, and The Return, which of course I'm going to look at now.